What are some practical ways that we as parents can ask better questions to have those types of meaningful conversations?
Yeah, and Joyce, lest you be under any illusions, it's not like Brad and I say to our own kids, well, you're asking a question about belonging right now. Let's go deeper in that.
Right.
Let's unpack your belonging issues.
Let's unpack your belonging issues. Pull up a chair. This paradigm of identity, belonging, and purpose is just super helpful for us as adults to have in our own minds. Because Joyce, like you, a lot of times I, as a parent, I'm trying to have a good conversation with my kids and I get mixed results. So welcome to the club. And, Brad and I, given our kids are roughly the same age, I can't even count, Brad, how many conversations you and I have had with other colleagues at the Foley Youth Institute, debriefing our own conversations, like what could we have done better? So parenting is just a constant learning journey. And, having 3 kids, it's clear to me that some kids are more chatty than others. And it certainly depends on the mood that kids in. And that young people, they're really transitioning to getting so much of that sense of belonging from their peers. So you are not a bad parent if you're getting shrugs or one-word answers, like, welcome to the club. Now, having said that, I think all of us, and I'm holding up the mirror to myself here, we can get better at asking better questions. And having questions that are actually generative and could lead to a better conversation. So based on the research we've done with Amazing Families nationwide, we actually have some really specific recommendations on phrases that are helpful. So folks might want to jot some of these down. In general, it's better to have open-ended questions and conversation prompts. So a phrase that I use quite a bit is, I'm curious. I'm curious. In fact, I used this with our 24-year-old son 2 days ago. This past weekend, we had a 60th birthday party for my husband, which was super fun. He knew the party was happening, but there were a lot of surprises connected with it. And it was such an amazing time to just celebrate the community that God's blessed us with. And so 24 hours after the party, I'm taking my 24-year-old to the airport who had flown down for the party. And I just thought, what? I want to see, what sparked in Nathan by being at this party. And so I started my conversation with, I'm curious. And I said to Nathan, what, I'm curious, Bud, that's my nickname for him. I'm curious, Bud, how did being at the party and seeing these people who celebrated your dad, how did that make you think about who you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I knew we couldn't fathom as old as my husband and I are, but with this shorter window, how does that help you think about who you want to be? And he was open to having the conversation. So we spent about 10 minutes talking about that just 2 days ago. And that phrase, I'm curious, is such a winner. It's game changing. So use that with your young people. Tell me more. That's such a great phrase too. When your young person says something and maybe you're not even sure how to follow up, say, tell me more about that. One family that we interviewed, they loved that phrasing so much, they made it a poster and put it in their living room because they wanted their teenage and young adult kids and their friends to know, hey, this is a place where you can tell me more. Also, I can imagine that is a third helpful phrase. I can imagine that maybe you're wondering, or I can imagine that's really hard for you. I can imagine that if I were you, I'd be thinking this. And that's another way to empathetically have a better conversation. And then I'll tell you, an image that has helped me so much as a parent comes from agriculture. And I am no farmer, and I don't know much about agriculture, but the metaphor is picking fruit off a tree. And if fruit is ripe, then when you pick it, it just comes off the tree naturally. And, when you're picking fruit, you don't want to wrestle with the branch and force it off. And so even, Nathan 2 nights ago, debriefing my husband's party on the way to the airport, I asked that I'm curious question, and that was my gentle tug, a gentle tug in the conversation. And if he wasn't open, then I wasn't going to force it. Let me just say the relationship is worth so much more than trying to force that fruit to happen. And this particular instance, he was open. So I would say, you know, as you're having that conversation with a young person, give a gentle tug, ask an open question. And if they want to go further, then great, but you don't need to force it. There'll be other windows where you can try again.
I love that. I love that analogy so much. And so much of it depends on their mood in the moment, reading, you know, how talkative they are at that particular moment. And sometimes I'm curious, like with their behavior.
Nice job, Joyce, using I'm curious, by the way. Way to go. Way to put into practice.
Saw that. You saw that.
Nice.
But when they are, you know, talking about something just about life, whatever, their friends, how can we get to a deeper point? Like it's just kind of surface conversation. How can we tell that they're really asking a question beneath the question? And it might point to something along the lines of like identity or belonging or purpose. And they really do want to talk. How do we get them to that place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, sometimes it's, you know, it's when we run into things that actually maybe rub us a little bit wrong. And so, okay, this may or may not be a familiar scenario. You pick up your 15-year-old from Thursday night soccer practice. She slumps in the passenger seat. She snaps at you, you know, or bursts into tears. This may or may not have happened to me in the past. And as a parent, you're kind of annoyed. You might even be angry. You know, you've put in some work here. You're doing her a favor. You didn't do anything wrong. But what you don't see in that moment is, you know, that kid was just out there giving her all for 2 hours on literal playing field where she might be working out, who am I really? You know, am I an athlete? What kind of an athlete am I in? Like, how does this, and working out belonging, do I fit here? Do they like me? What does the coach think of me? And purpose, you know, what part is this going to have in my life? And how am I thinking about this the next few years? And, you know, that's a lot of work to do on top of the work of practice, which has a whole other layer of things. And so, you know, of course that kid's going to get in the car exhausted or exhilarated. I mean, you know, like there's a wide range there, and may or may not want to talk to you about it, but she's been holding it together, and now she's in a safe place where she can just shut down or be grumpy. And, you know, lucky you can take it, you can handle it because you're a safe space. We're big fans here of psychologist Lisa D'Amour, and one of her catchphrases, she says, "School gets the best of them, we get the rest of them." And I think that's so true. We can sub in sports or, you know, drama or whatever activity in there. But when they're out in these spaces and they're having to perform and they're having to work through the questions in real time and kind of work out how they're going to, you know, engage. And then when they're with us, if we're the parents or the caregivers, you know, kind of let down or they shut down. And the more we understand that, what I have found in particular is it can help me empathize more. It can help me think, okay, this may not even be about me at all. You know, this may not be about anything that I've actually done or said. I don't need to turn this into some sort of big blow up if it's really, you know, could actually be about one or more of those big questions. And it can just like take the edge off a little bit, you know, and I think sometimes too, we can gently, you know, invite some better conversation about it. Quite honestly, sometimes that conversation might need to be 2 hours later or the next day. The other thing here is timing. I mean, to kind of piggyback too on what Kara was sharing, man, timing is everything with teenagers. And honestly, sometimes their timing doesn't fit very conveniently with our best timing. I go to bed earlier than I used to, you know, and teenagers, they get chattier later at night. And so sometimes we have to sort of figure out, you know, how and when to make some sacrifices. I've talked to so many parents who've said, you know, just about the time I'm ready to clock out, they're ready to check in. And they get chatty, and they're willing to sort of, process a little bit. So that can be tricky for us.
Right. And we just have to be available when they're available.
Yeah.
I had a friend who said that it's sort of like having outlets. And if all of your outlets there's like a plug in because you're really busy, there's no, when they're ready to plug in and you have no available outlet, then, there's no conversation. So having enough margin and being available when they're available. So that's a really, I'm glad you brought that up, Brad.